Welcome to American Women Writers National Museum. We're sponsoring today's program, and today's program is on poets. American Women Writers National Museum is a 501c3 nonprofit. We're 13 years old, and our mission is to honor American women writers, contemporary and historical. Our website is www.americanwomenwritersnationalmuseum.org, and you can view this video later on YouTube, or you can view it later on our website. So we'll start today by talking about our program. And today we're going to discuss with two authors, Consuelo Hernandez and her co-author and co-translator, Maria Roof. And they are both poets, as I understand it. And the name of the book is Wake of Chance. And then it has a Spanish title. I'm holding it up. And I guess we'll begin by telling us, what is this book about, Consuelo? You go first.
Oh, thank you so much, Janice. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here with you today. Thank you to American Women Writers National Museum Foundation that is conducted by you. It's really an honor to be here. And yeah, I'm here to talk about my most recent book, Wake Up Chance. Wake Up Chance, Estel de Azar. It was published in 2021, and it's a bilingual version. Was translated by Dr. Maria Roof and me. And so we're going here to talk about what is the book about. I think that the book is about love, hope, and humankind and discontents. The dedication that I wrote in the first pages, I think encapsulate very well what I am trying to say in this book. I'm going to read it because it's not too long. It's just 3-4 lines. And it says, to the fighters against unfair systems into which we are plunged every day, to the marginalized of the earth, those suffer from an indifference of the powerful, the misunderstood, the youth trafficked in marketplaces, abandoned and abused children, women, victims of exclusion, those forced to wear a mask over their sadness, all the mistreated animals, and to my poor, tormented planet. This part of the book, this dedication, and the first poem that is entitled I Can Write Verses, it summarizes what I'm treating in the book. I'm not going to read the first poem because it's a little long, but I can tell that in the book you are going to find topics like immigrants, nostalgia, surpassing limits, rage, protest against abuse of power, inequalities, and injustice. But also it speaks about art, freedom, love, music, peace, the power of dreaming women, and overall the desire for a different world, for a better world.
I should have asked you this first, but could you each tell a little about your background? I understand you're both academics, maybe where you went to school, or just generally some of your background. Ria, since you haven't said anything, do you want to start with that, Miss Roof? Can she hear? Is she? I'm not sure. Is Miss Roof, your audio on?
Yes, I'm having trouble hearing you because the volume is very low for you.
Oh, okay. I'll see if I can turn it up a bit here. Tell us just a little about your background, your academic and your personal background, just a bit of it.
Thank you. I appreciate your allowing me to come to this session today. I'm not the co-author. I am the co-translator.
Okay.
I was a professor for many years at Allegheny College in Meadville, Pennsylvania, and more recently at Howard University in Washington, D.C. I translated a number of books, among them poetry books, and I was very happy to collaborate with Consuelo on the translation of this book because I think it's a better translation because I had the input from the author.
Okay. And Consuelo, could you tell us just a little about your academic background and other background?
I was born in Colombia, and after coming here, I studied my PhD in New York University, and I work in different schools in New York, in same New York University, in Fordham University, and also in Manhattanville College. And in 1995, I came to Washington, D.C. For a position that I got in American University. And from there, I am already retired as an emeritus professor.
Okay, very, very impressive of both of you. Now, are these poems that you wrote some of these poems, or is it a collection of poems, or both?
Could you repeat? It seems like the volume for you is very low. You can
okay.
raise a little.
Oh, yes, I'll try and turn it up as much as I can.
Thank you.
Did you write some of these poems, or all of them, or are they a collection of poems of others, or a mixture of both?
Okay. I write these poems long time ago when I was writing other group of poems that I published before in 2016. But then when I submit the book in 2016 with these poems, the publisher said, no, these are a different kind of poems. Those are more in the social issues or topics. So why don't you leave this for another book? And we published the other ones that are more personal and intimate. And I did that. And I think they work perfectly because in 2001, we was just in the pandemics. And at that moment, my book came out, and it was like, it was written in that time, but it was not. It was written years before. And even the title is something that I had since the 90s. When I was reading my final dissertation, I have this title, and I love the title, but I never have a body of poems that fit with the title. And finally, I got this, and I think it's a good combination. That gives me the time to talk maybe about the cover, if you want.
Oh, yes, you want to talk about the title, Wake of Chance.
Yeah,
yes.
Because the cover, I did this little poster, but it's too blurred. So I'm going to work with the book. Wake of Chance is the title, and the publisher, Floricanto Press, that is the publisher of this book, sent me two covers, two options, but I didn't like it because they didn't reflect exactly what I wanted to say with the title and with the poems. So I contacted a very good friend and painter, and that is based in New York, Felix Portela, and he sent me 3 images of his paintings. And the first sight, I fall in love with this one because it reflects perfect the concept of chance. You see, it's a lily flower with a leaf that is not the leaf of the lily plant. It's a different plant in a vase that is almost ready to burst in pieces. And then in this corner, you see a ring, and you see from very close inside the ring or through the ring, you see a small house with a window and a door and the roof through the ring. Besides, the base is on the ground, and the leaves and flower are in the sky. So I thought this is a perfect combination to reflect the concept of chance, and also it made me think about the poet, the surrealist poet, Conde Lotramon, that has an image that I think you are familiar with it, very it's very famous that image is he says, beautiful as the encounter and of a typewriter with an umbrella in a table, in a dissection table. Beautiful as the encounter of a typewriter and an umbrella in a dissection table. So that's what the original, the cover. And I think I like it very much.
Now, who do you see as your target audience? What is your target audience? Maybe I'll ask Maria, do you want to address that, or Consuelo, whichever one you want to?
Consuelo,
Yeah, Maria and I were working in this. That I don't have, when I write, I don't have a target audience. I write because I have that organic necessity to express myself or to get rid of something that is bothering me inside. And I write from a place of sincerity and truth. And so the last thing that I think when I am writing is who's going to read it. But then when the book is ready, then I start to think about the audience, because once the book is published, it's no more your book. The book fall in the hands of the audience and the readers. But I still want it so much that the readers can be touched by my book, that they are moved, and they are able to do something, a little something, anything to remedy the loss of ethics and the destruction and the deterioration that we are living today. So it's not a book that I can say it's for adults, it's for children, no, it's for everybody. Anybody can read the books and maybe get something from there. I hope that the powerful, the powerless, the rich, the poor, the young, the old, every people can read this book and find something that move, question, or at least strike them emotionally.
What do you remember back? What was the first poem you ever read? How old were you? And what do you remember? What the first poem or the circumstances? The first poem.
The very, very first poem that I wrote was
read.
When I was 11 years old.
When you read. The first poem you read yourself. The first poem you saw, someone else's work.
you read.
The first poem I read.
Yeah.
The first poem I read was the first poem I read, no. I remember more the first poems that I heard from my mother.
Okay.
Because my mother knew many poems, and she used to recite, and I love it because all had rhyme, and I like that music. And I say again, and I make her repeat it hundreds of times, the same thing. She also knows so many riddles and short stories with rhyme for children. And that was my first contact with poet, but I didn't know that I was poet, and I didn't know that that was rhyme. I just liked the sounds and the words and the way my mother used to do it to me. Then when I was like 5 years old, I didn't read yet. I learned to read maybe at 6, and the teacher from the school sent to my mom one poem with 6 or 8 lines that she has to read it to me many times, because I was going to recite this poem in front of everybody when I was 5 years old. And then I wrote my first poem at 11 years old when my grandmother died.
Did you come from an intellectual family? You said your mother liked poetry.
No, not at all. I was born in the countryside, and I lived there until I was 10. But my mom was always, I think that my mom, in other circumstances and with a different view of the women, she would be an artist, a writer, or because she has such a fine sensibility. And my father was also a great reader of poetry. So I have like those two elements from them, but they were not intellectual. My father was more a landlord and into politics, and my mom was working for us at home.
Okay. Now, Maria, did you want to talk about the process of translation? Consuelo said you and she worked together in kind of a unique partnership with the translation. Do you want to address that, please?
Yes, I'd like to. In fact, I'd like to say a few words about translation in general, and then talk about how Consuelo and I worked together, and then give you some examples from a poem that I think Consuelo is going to read of how we developed the translation together. Translation you can think of as a science, a craft, and an art, but there are degrees of difficulty in it for human and non-human translators. First, you have translation of things like reports or journalistic prose. Your goal is accuracy. This is very easy. Google can do it and do it well. Then you have creative fiction, where you might have more figurative language, metaphors. This is more complex. And you have to understand that it's not such direct language. Your goal then is accuracy, but also a style that's reflective of the original. Google will have more trouble with this type of prose. And then finally, we have poetry. Poetry, the language tends to be abstract, suggestive, extremely concise, lacking in many of the elements of sentence structure. You have a different word order, and your goal becomes accuracy, of course, but also a style that's reflective of the original and that sounds good in the target language. And I think that translating poetry involves two very important steps. The first one is you have to understand what the original says. You have to recognize within that the register of language. Is it a common word or phrase that's being used? Is it a regional usage? Is it a new word, a neologism? Is it used in a special way? Is it an idiomatic expression or a phrase with opposite meanings, like the word sanction in English, which can mean opposite things? So that's the first step, is you must understand the original. And then the second is to find a comparable use in the target language, considering all the shades of meaning of the supposed synonyms. Plus, you have to consider the sound and the rhythm, and that's the importance of the word choice. When you're translating from Spanish, this is rather difficult because Spanish is a Latin-based language versus English, which is a sponge. It was originally Germanic, Anglo-Saxon. It absorbed French, Latin, and continues to absorb new words. The result is that Spanish has, according to the Royal Academy of Language, 93,000 words, more or less. And according to the Oxford English Dictionary, English has almost double, 170,000 words. So you have choices in English. You have synonyms, but they're shades of difference. I learned from working with Consuelo on this book that as a translator, I had to pay more attention to the texture of the words, the rhythm, and the sound, because she does when she selects the words and the phrases. I was always pretty good with the rhythm of a line of poetry because I have a background in music, but not so much the sound of the word itself. And I'm going to give you some examples of that. The way Consuelo and I approached this is that I drafted a translation of the poems, and then because it was in the period of COVID, we had marathon phone conversations over many, many days, considering the different options to create the best versions in American English. And I want to give you just 3 examples from a poem called Love is a Bridge, which has been a very popular poem in this book, and I think Consuelo is going to read it afterwards. And I want to talk to you about three of the options. The first line was easy. Love is a bridge over the solitary river. The second line was in Spanish, sorteador de abismos. Okay, sorteador, looked it up, doesn't exist. But I know what sortear means. It means to overcome difficulties. So I looked in the dictionary to see what other words go with it. Well, it turns out it also means to raffle. So if you had a machine translator doing this, they probably would have said for this line's translation, a raffler of abysses. Don't know what that means. But it could mean, besides raffle, negotiate, navigate, avoid, weather, circumvent, bridge, over, thread your way through, and so forth. But you get the idea. So we have understood what a sorteador de abismos means. I also know that Consuelo lived close to the Andes and that her poems have often a great sense of heights and depths. So when she talks about abysses, it is sometimes in the existential sense of an abyss, and sometimes it means depth. And so we ended up on this line with the phrase, love is a bridge over the solitary river, hurtling across ravines. And I think that's a good translation of that. Captures, and yet it has a good flow to it, and it maintains the R sound that is so prominent in the first verse. Later on in the poem, she says, it's a kiss of two strangers, and the rest of the phrase means who are jumping because they're happy. And so our first sentence, our first translation was, two strangers leap for joy. But Consuelo didn't like that. And she liked of two strangers jumping for joy, which has the rhyme jumping for joy. But jumping for joy to me sounded too colloquial. So we reached a compromise on of two strangers leaping for joy, which is a little bit more poetic. And the final example I'd like to give is from the final verses. And as in the beginning, I've translated, let us offer our bodies to the rites of Eros. I love that line. I love the translation. Good rhythm, good sound, 13 syllables. However, to the poet, the line at the end sounded too choppy. The rites of Eros was too choppy. And so she changed it, also 13 syllables, to say, let's offer our bodies to the rituals of Eros, which I have to admit is softer, more sensual, more appropriate in the context. And this is when I learned that Consuelo likes the longer phrases in her English translations.
Well, speaking of the longer phrases, I want to give Consuelo time to read some of her poetry. And I just got a notice that we have about 8 minutes left, I think. So
how many minutes?
8, I think 8 minutes.
Okay, that's perfect. I think we can wrap it up with.
I do want to ask, how can, if someone wants to purchase a copy of your book, how do they do that? Through Amazon?
It's in many places. You just Google where they have it. They have it in Amazon, in
Barnes and Noble.
In many places. You just Google and you will find it.
Okay. And so let's see. Oh, I did want to ask you, well, go ahead. I think just go ahead and read your poem. Read what
Okay.
poems.
I'm going to read the poem that just Maria talked about.
Okay.
Love is a bridge. Love is a bridge over the solitary river, hurtling across ravines, an arc agleam interrupting flows, an intrusive wind into the virgin fields. Love is a bridge towards life. It is an eye between reality and reflection, a passage between slums bonded by an unpredicted wind. It is a kiss of two strangers leaping for joy. Let's be bridges again on the span of embraces. And from the handrail, let's raise a song that melts the fog and demolishes its walls. And as in the beginning, let's offer our bodies to the rituals of Eros.
Oh, very beautiful. Yeah,
Thank you.
that was lovely. I do have a question that you said that you wanted to be asked, and I think it's an excellent question. Is there a strong Latin American poetry in the United States? You want to address that?
Yes, certainly. What was that question? In general, I will tell you there is a strong movement of Spanish poetry in United States. There are, to put an example here in Washington, there is the Maratón de Poesía that was created 31 years ago, when nobody thought about the momentum and the importance that the poetry in Spanish we are going to have in this moment. And poetry in general, poetry has taken the world in the last years. And this Maratón de Poesía is developed in the Library of Congress, where we have one day, and the other day is in the Teatro de la Luna. I think this is one of the big activities here. There are also other groups in New York, for instance. You have 3 festivals of poetry in Spanish, and 2 or 3 presses also for Spanish speakers. And same happens in Florida, and in Ohio there is the Association of Hispanic Writers in Ohio, and they are going to have the first book fair this year in October. And in California, it's even more abundant. In West Coast, I think you find much more organizations for Spanish poetry than here. And there is a big community of Spanish writers in the United States. Many of them published in Spanish, other in Spanglish, other that came very early here to the country and have a perfect dominion of the language. They write only in English. So my answer is yes, there is a big movement and a strong poetry publications and presses in Spanish here in the United States. We are 65 million of Spanish speakers here. So that's something that the momentum is waiting for the Spanish people here, but we are 60 million, that's undeniable.
Okay. Now, how can people contact you? Do you have a website, or if they want to look at your work, how can they contact you or look at your work?
They can contact me through Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
They can contact me through my email. If it is for professional things, I have the American University email, chdez@american.edu.
Okay.
And otherwise, you contact me on my portal in Facebook.
Okay.
I don't have a web page. I don't have time to fill those pages. So many things that I would like to do in my life, but the time is, now I am counting more the hours and the days than before because the time passed.
Yes, I think we all feel that.
Yeah.
The presence of time. I noticed, Maria, that you seem to have no accent almost in Spanish. How were you familiar with the Spanish language? Was it something you just studied, or?
I studied Latin in high school and would have majored in it in college, only you had to study a modern language. So I took Spanish, loved it. I began Spanish in college, loved it, spent a year in Spain, And then afterwards was fortunate enough to live in Latin America for several years and have gone back, went back to Madrid with a study abroad program. And then now I'm more focused on Central America. So I've traveled a lot throughout Central America, been to Colombia several times, but not to Consuelo City. So
It's pending.
but I shall go.
Are there any American women who have influenced your poetry, Consuelo? Can you think of any American women?
Yeah, Louise Gluck and Emily Dickinson.
Yeah.
Yes. I was thinking Emily Dickinson as well. She's everyone's favorite woman poet, I think. Yes. Is your work anything like hers in the pacing of it or the subject matter? Or is your work like hers in any way in the pacing of her work, the subject matter?
I like the profundity of her poetry.
Yes.